President of the University of Virginia, Teresa Sullivan.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be part of the 2013 TomTom Founders Festival and to have this opportunity to talk with you about leadership. You know, I think one of the problems with leadership is the assumptions that we bring to the table when we think about it. Are leaders really rare, say like diamonds are? Or is leadership actually pretty widely scattered around the landscape, more like carbon is? You know, people say a diamond is just carbon under pressure. But I think the assumptions you make about leadership are very important to the ways you seek to develop leaders. I learned some of my most valuable lessons about leadership not at a university, but as a Girl Scout. Now, I think the Girl Scouts are another kind of teaching organization, and they make the assumption that lots of girls can be leaders. One of the most important lessons I learned was the old maxim of the Girl Scouts that a patrol leader puts her patrol ahead of herself and the troop ahead of the patrol. It was a way of saying that leadership is really a role of servant leadership, a way in which you serve other people and not a method of self-glorification. Another leadership idea I learned from the Girl Scouts was the motto, be prepared. As a Girl Scout, I learned first aid, and I also learned safety in a whole lot of circumstances like boating and camping and traveling. Some of these skills you hope you never have to use, but it does build a sense of self-confidence to know you could give CPR if you had to, or if the canoe turned over, you'd know what to do next. Learning about safety helps you to think ahead and to link cause to effect. So when you build a campfire safely, you're thinking ahead to preventing an uncontrolled fire. A key role of the best leaders is that they prevent problems. They look ahead because the leader is skilled at early identification and at prevention. I think our definitions of leadership are often too constricted, maybe because a lot of us are thinking about those really rare diamonds. When we speak of leadership, many of us often mean only what we might call heroic leaders, people who step up in a crisis and really through sheer force of personality manage to save a situation. The role of the heroic leader may mean that a team is forgotten because the heroic leader so overshadowed everything else that happened. There's much to admire in the heroic leader. This is somebody who's single-minded in resolving a crisis, often at risk to one's own reputation or even life. George Washington is an example of the heroic leader in his role during the Revolutionary War. Who else would have led that starving, ragtag Continental Army to the most improbable result, which was defeating the world's military superpower, the British Empire? Heroic leaders defy the odds, and so we tend to idolize them for that reason. On the other hand, it often means that many of us exclude ourselves from the ranks of leaders because we don't see ourselves in the heroic mold. But heroism is not the only way to be a leader. There are also what I like to call the sustainable leaders. Sustainable leaders build value for the long haul, and they put in place the systems and culture in an organization to ensure long-run success. Sustainable leaders are more likely to think in terms of an entire team. What constitutes the team? What kind of training each member of the team gets? Which members of the team have the capacity to take on additional responsibility? And how the team can function if one or more of the people leave. Sustainable leaders build a durable organization. While charismatic hero leaders may still appear, the sustainable leader tries to build an organization that doesn't rely on the personality of a single individual. I think George Washington could be studied in this context again. Although his heroic leadership role might have been more glamorous, as president, he was a good example of a sustainable leader. He was offered the kingship and refused to be a king. The peaceful transition of power set a sign for something completely new in the Republic. But it represented his belief that the next generation would have to step forward and be the leaders because the generation of the founders would pass from the scenes. Today we'd call it succession management. So as George Washington shows, types of leadership are not mutually exclusive. Heroic leaders can be sustainable leaders, and sustainable leaders can be charismatic heroes when they have to be. And there are also dangers to both types of leadership. The sustainable leader can fade into the woodwork so that it looks as if no leadership is actually taking place. The team may work so well that no one notices that it was the leader who got the team going. And the danger for the heroic leader is the addiction to the adrenaline, that the crisis becomes so invigorating that the hero seeks out additional crises to solve. In the comic books, the superheroes have a never-ending set of crises to deal with, so creating one is never a problem. But for a real-life heroic leader, it can be a temptation. My point here in this simple dichotomy is that leadership is multifaceted and not the prerogative of a single personality type, and certainly not the prerogative of a specific background or training. I think that anyone can be a leader. One of my goals at the University of Virginia is to develop a culture of leadership among all of us who work there. First, because I think that's the best way to ensure that our students are leaders, and second, because I think it's the best way to ensure that the university is improved. Every employee brings a unique perspective to how a particular job is best done, or how a particular unit functions. By empowering every employee to lead, we will create a broad culture of leadership. I think this will work for UVA, and I think it will work for any organization. Let me tell you a story that I think illustrates this point. On the morning of January 21st, about 5 in the morning, a truck from County Waste was driving down Wirtland Street, picking up the trash, when the workers on the truck saw that the porch at 1256 Wirtland was on fire. This was a wooden frame house that was home to 13 UVA students. Now, the waste disposal workers are taught by their company to be very quiet because they pick up the trash in the early morning hours and you don't want to wake people up. But this truck driver did something that his company would never want him to do. He leaned on the air horn, and he also called 911. And his partner also did something that people at this company are never expected to do. He jumped out of the cab and went over and picked up stones and threw them at the second-story windows to try and wake up the people who were sleeping there. 2 of the students were awakened by the stones hitting their windows, and eventually all the students got out alive and unharmed. They lost most of what they owned, but they lived to tell the story. Now, those workers for County Waste might say that their job is to collect trash, but their larger purpose is to make life better for our community. And when they saw the fire, they demonstrated empowerment and leadership because they responded to that larger purpose in our community, even though it required them to improvise and to be creative. Today is Thomas Jefferson's birthday. He would have been 270 years old today. Jefferson believed that the University of Virginia should teach useful knowledge to its students to equip them for leadership in the American Republic. In a letter to a friend, he described what he called the important truths: that knowledge is power, that knowledge is safety, and that knowledge is happiness. I would also add that knowledge is a foundation of strong leadership. Here in Charlottesville, we're fortunate to live in a community where education is highly valued. In our public schools, in our private schools, Piedmont Virginia Community College, at UVA, and that everywhere in this community, people gather together to share knowledge. And of course, that includes this year's TomTom Founders Festival. So I appreciate all of you being here, and I appreciate it being invited to speak to you today. Thanks very much.